27 years. Take a moment to really think about how long that is. It's nearly 10,000 days. It is an entire generation. Imagine being locked in a tiny, damp concrete cell for that long. Robbed of your prime years, forbidden from attending your own mother's funeral, banned from seeing your children grow up. All because you demanded that your people be treated as human beings. If that happened to you, what would you feel on the day you finally walked out? Rage? Bitterness? A burning desire for revenge? No one would have blamed Nelson Mandela if he had walked out of prison in 1990 calling for a violent uprising to crush the government that stole his life. Millions were waiting for his command to do exactly that. But he didn't. Instead, he did something that shocked the world, enraged some of his allies, and ultimately saved a nation from a massive civil war. He forgave them.
If you spend 27 years in jail, where you waste your life, the flower of your life, you have no time to be negative.
Welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at the life of Nelson Mandela. Not just the grandfatherly icon of peace we remember today, but the radical revolutionary, the prisoner, and the masterful politician who used forgiveness as his ultimate weapon.
Take your guns, your knives, and your pangas, and throw them into the sea.
To understand the weight of Mandela's forgiveness, we first have to understand who he was before prison. Modern history often sanitizes him into a harmless, peaceful figure, but young Nelson Mandela was a fighter. Born into the Thembu royal family in 1918, Mandela grew up to become a lawyer, dedicating his life to fighting the brutal system of apartheid. Throughout the 1950s, he and the African National Congress led peaceful protests, strikes, and boycotts. But peace was met with bullets. After the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, where police gunned down 69 unarmed black protesters, Mandela made a fateful decision. He concluded that nonviolent resistance against a violently racist state was no longer working.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people. And I think the time has come for us to consider, in the light of our experiences in this stay at home.
Mandela co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the ANC. He became the Black Pimpernel, traveling in disguise, training in guerrilla warfare, and orchestrating bombings against government infrastructure. He wasn't a pacifist. He was an armed revolutionary fighting for his people's survival. But in 1962, he was captured. During the famous Rivonia trial, Mandela and his comrades faced the death penalty for sabotage and treason. Instead of testifying in his own defense to save his life, Mandela used the courtroom to put apartheid on trial. His closing statement is one of the most famous speeches of the 20th century. He looked the white judge in the eye and said,
"It is an ideal and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunity. It is an ideal for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die."
He wasn't sentenced to death. He was sentenced to life and shipped off to Robben Island. Robben Island was designed to break men. Mandela was designated a Class D prisoner, the lowest possible rank. He was allowed 1 visitor and 2 letters per year. His days were spent doing grueling, blindingly bright manual labor in a limestone quarry. The glare permanently damaged his eyesight. The guards were exclusively white Afrikaners, trained to view the prisoners as subhuman terrorists. The psychological warfare was relentless. But it was here, in this suffocating isolation, that Mandela underwent a profound transformation. He realized that if he allowed his hatred to consume him, the apartheid government would have won. They would have imprisoned his mind as well as his body. So, Mandela changed his strategy. He decided to study his enemy. He learned Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors. He read their history and poetry. He learned about their fears and their fierce attachment to South Africa. Why? Because Mandela realized that defeating apartheid wasn't just about military victory. It was about persuasion. By speaking to the guards in their own language and asking about their families, he forced them to see his humanity. Over the years, the most brutal wardens began to address him not as boy, but as Mr. Mandela. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, his legend was growing. While the apartheid government banned his photo and his words, he became the most famous political prisoner on the planet. The world was screaming for his release. And by the late 1980s, the South African government, crippled by economic sanctions and violent internal uprisings, realized they had a massive problem. They needed a way out, and the only man who could give it to them was the man they had locked in a cage. On February 11, 1990, the doors finally opened. At 71 years old, Nelson Mandela walked free. But if you think the story has a happy ending right there, you are missing the most dangerous chapter of South African history. The country was a powder keg. White extremists were arming themselves, terrified of a black takeover. Rival black political factions were fighting bloody turf wars in the townships. A full-scale racial civil war felt inevitable. In 1993, the nation was pushed to the absolute brink when Chris Hani, a fiercely popular black liberation leader, was assassinated by a white supremacist. The townships erupted. The country was hours away from descending into an apocalyptic race war. The white president, F.W. de Klerk, had lost control. There was only one person the country would listen to. Mandela went on national television. He didn't call for revenge. He didn't stoke the immense justified rage of his followers. Instead, he spoke of unity. He noted that while a white man had pulled the trigger, it was an Afrikaner woman who had memorized the killer's license plate and called the police. He begged his people for peace. He held the nation together by sheer force of will and moral authority. He chose reconciliation over retribution. In 1994, Nelson Mandela became the first democratically elected black president of South Africa.
I, Nelson Mandela, do hereby swear to be faithful to the Republic of South Africa.
Now, he had the power. He could have fired the white government workers, purged the military, and punished the men who jailed him. Instead, he established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It offered amnesty to those who committed politically motivated crimes during apartheid, on the condition that they publicly confessed the full truth of their actions. It was painful, but it allowed the country to lance the boiling wound of its past rather than bleed out from it. And then, there was the brilliant masterstroke of 1995.
It was a defining moment for South Africa and for Nelson Mandela, a rugby game.
Rugby was the beloved sport of white Afrikaners, deeply resented by the black majority as a symbol of apartheid. But when South Africa hosted the Rugby World Cup, Mandela wore the Springbok jersey. He embraced the team. In that single moment on the field, he showed the white minority that they belonged in this new South Africa too. Mandela famously wrote, "As I walked out the door, toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." Nelson Mandela's forgiveness wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a calculated, brilliant, and incredibly difficult political strategy. He understood that you cannot build a prosperous future on a foundation of blood and revenge. He took the unbearable injustice of his 27 lost years and transformed it into the currency that bought his country's freedom: What do you think is Mandela's greatest legacy? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video inspiring, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.